Good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day. We're so glad you're celebrating with us at lunch here at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Carrie Schmidt with Plentiful Philanthropy. I'm also proud to be a board member of the Columbus Metropolitan Club and chair of the Resource Committee. And thank you to the generous sponsors of today's forum, PNC Bank, the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, and the Columbus State Community College. And thank you to the host, the Ellis, for your generous support of today's program. All right, we're also grateful to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. And thank you all for joining. So today's forum is Understanding the New Landscape of Childcare. And this is an issue that is so important to all of us in this room, everyone tuning in, and of course to me personally as well. I'm so happy we're here having this conversation. There's no secret that the basics of economics in childcare in America is broken. Many of Ohio's childcare providers aren't able to meet the current demand for their services from employers and their families. And today we'll unpack the factors causing many of Central Ohio's childcare providers to struggle. And on the bright side, we'll also look at how the region can chart a path to a sustainable and equitable future for childcare. To introduce today's panelists, we welcome Mary Alk from PNC Bank. Thank you, Mary.
First order of business. Well, thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that lovely introduction, and I just want to say how glad we are to be here with all of you. So thrilled to see a sold-out crowd for such an important topic. And a quick hello to those watching live stream. I think many of us would agree that's one of the greatest things that got added during the pandemic. When you miss a subject that you really want to hear about and learn about, you can watch it live or catch the replay. So on behalf of the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, Columbus State Community College, and the Central Ohio employees of PNC Bank, we welcome you to today's CMC Luncheon. I'd like to thank you for taking the time today to join for this timely and very important conversation in our community. Today, you'll hear more about a stunning recent report from Action for Children, the Child Care Poverty Provider Survey, that uncovered critical issues facing child care providers in Central Ohio, including concerns about staffing, capacity, and tuition increases. I know there are copies on your tables as well, and I know our panelists, especially Eric, will make comment on that. More than half of the providers reported that their monthly revenue does not cover expenses. So in addition to some of the comments that were made by Carrie about capacity, et cetera, the recent findings by Action for Children emphasize the need for sustained, flexible investment in Central Ohio's child care centers and family child care programs. As a business leader and as a parent myself, I truly worry about the impact this could have on the future of our community. And I'm proud to lead an organization that prioritizes investments in early childhood education. But I'm often asked in the public, why does PNC, a bank, place such a profound philanthropic focus on this space? And the answer in my mind is simple. The return on investment for high-quality early education and school readiness initiatives will impact our children, our society, and the health of our economy for generations to come. This understanding is what drives PNC's Grow Up Great programming. It's a $500 million multi-year bilingual initiative that launched 20 years ago to help prepare children from birth to age 5 for success both in school and in life. Here in Central Ohio, we've provided support to nonprofits, early learning centers, and cultural organizations to provide educational programming. And this year, we're very excited to support 20-year anniversary of Grow Up Great. We do this because we believe that inspiring a love of learning will create a brighter future for children and families in the communities where we live and work. And I know that each of our guests today are as passionate as we are about this issue. And I look forward to learning more from them about the challenges and opportunities ahead. So now it's my very distinct honor to introduce today's speakers. On our panel today, we have Carol Haynes, Executive Director of Kitty Academy, Eric Korolek, Chief Executive Officer of Action for Children, Azleen Rodriguez, Senior Director of Regional Strategic Partnerships for CODA, and Kara Wente, Director of the Department of Children and Youth for the great state of Ohio. And our host, Sierra Johnson, anchor and reporter for NBC4. So at this time, I'll turn the podium to Sierra. We look forward to the conversation.
Hello, hello. I love seeing a full house. There's nothing like conversation, middle of the week, just kind of get things going and really kind of diving into some of those topics that we all care about. So I guess just to start off kind of in a broad perspective, show of hands for you all, not for the panelists. How many of you are taking part in childcare? How many of you have children in childcare? How many of you are childcare providers? How many of you will soon have children in childcare? It's a lot of folks, a lot of folks. So today, as she mentioned, we're going to unpack the very complex issue of childcare here in Central Ohio. It's an issue that not only affects folks here, but folks around the nation. It's, as we mentioned, complex. So let's start off by really defining what childcare is. A lot of us picture traditional daycare centers, but as time is evolving, folks working from home, work life looks different, childcare looks different. So I guess, one by one, if you want to walk us through in your eyes what you view childcare as.
For me, as both a provider, a mom, and a grandmother, I view childcare really as more than just children coming into our schools and our academy. For us and for me, care includes our family providers. Care also includes what's going on each and every day in each of our academies, regardless of economic status as well. It includes everything from that first high five in the morning to that evening hug and looking forward to the next day and all those things in between that allow students to grow and learn and live healthy lives as well. And so we want to make sure that throughout the care environment that we're able to incorporate those learning milestones as well as our social, emotional, and healthcare milestones as well.
I'm not sure what I'd add to that. It's beautiful. But I will say a couple of things. Childcare is both a work support and it's also an early education program. So those working parents are relying on you every day, right? And it takes place in a variety of settings. Some are licensed and some are not. The licensed settings for childcare are centers. There can be storefronts. They can be attached to a church or a synagogue or a mosque. They can be nonprofit or for-profit. Some of them are home-based, some of those licensed programs. In our region, there are more than 1,200 childcare providers. Just a little over 1 in 5 are home-based. But actually, most childcare is home-based because most of it is unlicensed. The neighbor down the street, informal care, your grandmother arrangements that occur. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. It's also worth thinking about the money for childcare, where the money comes from. And an old adage, about 20 years old now, is that funding for childcare came about 1%, 2% from private foundations, thank goodness for them, and about a third, as I recall, from public sources, governments. And the vast majority, though, came from all of us, private families, paying a portion or all of the tuition that childcare providers charge. So it's really something that we all have a stake in.
As a relatively new mom, I have a 10 going on 11-month-old. To me, it's peace of mind, right? Quality childcare is peace of mind because I still have to go to work, and it's also the employer behind it, right? Knowing that you have programs that support that are critical to your ability to be effective at work, right? Peace of mind is the thing that allows you to focus on the meeting versus like what's happening to my child.
Well, I think they covered it. I can hit the state bureaucratic response up here, but I won't on Valentine's Day. I'll save you from that. I think that the part that I would reiterate that you all said so well is it's if you're going to school or you're going to work or you can't be with your own kids, who can you trust them with? Whether it's 8 to 5, which is what a lot of people think about, or if it's overnight care because you're working second or third shift. And I think from the perspective of, yes, it's health and safety. We have to make sure, first and foremost, those kids are safe. But if they can't be with their parents, how do we make sure they're getting something in addition to just that health and safety response? How are we preparing them for school and life and to be successful in our communities? And I think that's a key component that so many childcare providers do so well, that we assume and we know they do, but we don't always celebrate and give them credit for. So really want to call that out today as well.
All really good and diverse answers. Eric, I want to circle back to you. A lot of us have the report on our tables. I guess, can you really break down and highlight some of the big takeaways?
This is a bit challenging because I'm not known for brevity. But for you in the room, and if you're live streaming or watching on recording, it'll be available from our website at actionforchildren.org. On page 3 and 4, you have a nice summary of the main data points. I would say the summary of this report is that childcare is in crisis. It's a crisis for families. It's a crisis for the early childhood workforce. It's a crisis for employers and our economy. And this report is a kind of call to action. You said stunning. Wow. It should be galvanizing, because we should not allow such a vital sector doing such important work in recreating our workforce, in supporting the education of young children, in creating thriving environments for children and families to linger as it does in the conditions it's in. You'll see, if you're looking to that report, that there's a real crisis of confidence. It's a little better, actually, but a crisis of confidence in the sense that about 13% of providers aren't sure they can stay open another quarter. That's improvement from when we first started doing these surveys in 2020. Back then, local governments were coming to us with questions, and our usual data sources weren't changing fast enough to keep up with what was happening in March and April and May of 2020. So this survey was launched to be able to answer questions. And one of the first questions was, how do providers feel? And so you have this question around how your outlook looks. It's ticked up a little bit, but in the main, the last 2-3 years have been an improvement over where it was in 2020 and 2021. And that has a lot to do with resources that have been coming into the space. The report was used in 2020 and 2021 to support local investments using CARES Act and then CURSA and now ARPA, the 3 main federal relief funding sources that were used by the City of Columbus and more recently by Franklin County to really bolster support for our early childhood providers. But still, the fundamentals, the economics of childcare are very difficult. Mira mentioned half of providers aren't able to cover their expenses with existing revenue. And that comes down in part to the lack of enrollment. When childcare was closed and then reopened in 2020, we thought we'd see families come back as robustly as they had been before, but that hasn't happened. And enrollment is hovering in the low 60s, 60%. And for a good childcare business to feel comfortable and safe, correct me, you really want to be at least 80% enrollment, and ideally 100%, especially if you are dependent on publicly funded childcare. And so that low enrollment is a real problem. And it stems from 2 things. We've been talking for a long time in the childcare advocacy community about a workforce shortage. Absolutely true. But what the reports show, what providers told us this time, is that the top reason why they were having enrollment troubles is lack of parent enrollment, which they directed or identified as being a function of parents not being able to afford childcare or childcare not offered when they needed it, those off-hour slots, and troubles with transportation. Now, it just nudged out the workforce issue. So the workforce issue is absolutely a crisis. You'll also see in the report that 7 out of 10 childcare centers have open positions, are looking for childcare. About 1,600 positions can be hired right now at a childcare center. But that lack of enrollment is keeping revenue down and is a symptom of that staffing crisis. And of course, on page 11, there's a lovely graphic, a circular graphic. If you don't have staffing, you can't have the enrollment come through, and your revenue is decreasing, what you see is an increase in tuition. For the 2nd year in a row, we've got a very strong indication that tuition is going up. More than half of providers had increased tuition last year, and between last year and this year, 3 out of 4 childcare programs is raising tuition. Not something they want to do because, again, the economics of childcare are broken, but something they have to do in order to be able to attract workers. So the report has some other information in it about the impact of those stabilization grants. The state made a huge effort there and what they were used for, the impact that those had. It also shares a little bit about the well-being of the workforce. We've been listening to providers very closely the last few years, and this has been a tiring time for everybody, but an especially tiring time for early childhood educators who are in day and out, not only with young children, but with families that are in real serious need of help. And they're telling us they need relief, they struggle with being burnt out, and we know that there aren't supports enough for them. The reports show that only about 1/3 of childcare providers are able to offer insurance, for example, health insurance. We know that childcare employees overall nationally are in the bottom 2% of occupations pay-wise. There's about 1/3 of childcare workers are food insecure, or half qualify for public assistance of one form or another. So these underlying numbers, the numbers we picked up in this year's report, they are symptomatic of a very deep problem in this critical sector. I could go on, but I think it's time to, let a little sunshine in the room and look for something positive too.
Well, while we're still on that topic, I do want to give folks a chance to respond. I mean, I know some of you all are living what was found in the reports, but is there anything that surprised you that you may have either heard him discuss or that you read in that report?
I don't think that anything necessarily surprised me. I think we were more in line with what was in the report. But what I had also shared with Eric as well, just really around COVID and the pandemic, is that we were able to recover sooner, more effectively, more efficiently in our centers that operated as pandemic centers. And so our centers where we closed, we have continued to struggle with enrollment in those centers as well. And so within the report, one of the things that will always stand out to me was around staff well-being and how our teachers and our educators are doing in our schools, in our academy, and just wondering, are we doing enough for them? And wondering kind of what that long-term solution is for really all of our staff across all of our academies. And so when I say across our academies, we're kind of in a unique situation where we manage centers that are fully publicly funded. We also manage centers that are fully private pay. And I think that that presents different challenges for our teams. Really across Central Ohio, we're located as far west as Hilliard and as far east as Pickerington. Our dynamic is we have our oldest academy has been open since 2011, and we were somewhat bullish, I think, through the pandemic, and we opened square footage-wise our largest academy in Pickerington, just because there was such a significant need as well. My daughter had my granddaughter in 2017, and there was a significant wait list for infant and toddler care in Pickerington as well, and so it just lended itself as an opportunity during the pandemic to grow and expand. But I think that recovery period, providers are struggling. Providers are everything that the report shows. Providers are hurting with regards to kind of where do we go next for sustainability. You mentioned stabilization dollars and grants that have come into our sector and our industry, and by far have done a phenomenal job of really assisting providers with kind of closing the gap, so to speak. But I think the difficult piece with the stabilization dollars is we really struggle to budget those dollars because fixed cost, which the report lends itself to as well in terms of rent, utilities, are difficult to meet when the enrollment is not there in our schools, in our academy. And so I think we're looking for kind of that next decision, where do we go next from here in terms of how we continue to build and move forward and support children and families along the way.
Well, what I'll add too is the transportation part as one of the barriers. And so CODA is committed to child care centers being located by transit centers. So we have 2 child care centers, one at our Easton Town Center, Transit Center, and one at our Linden. And we are in the process of building a state-of-the-art mobility center in the Rickenbacker area. And there's a huge need there with employees. And that center will be inclusive of the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, a child care center, and ideally we'll have a medical provider there, all at a transit center. And so we're thinking about the whole person and the work that the care they need in order to get to work, right? That's dropping my child off, picking up my groceries if that's the case, going to the Minute Clinic and getting this thing that I haven't been paying attention to that needs medical attention, right? And so in addition to that, many of you know we have a very large initiative called Link Us. And we are thinking about that through what's called ETOD, Equitable Transit-Oriented Development. So it's not just about building this new high-capacity transit, it's also what's located along the path. Affordable housing, making sure there's childcare, making sure there's groceries. So our first corridor is West Broad, the next is East Main, and then Northwest. And we're being intentional about thinking about that now because we all know that transit has invited people in and pushed people out in some cases. And so we're very mindful of that in collaboration with other partners.
I'm going to jump back to the infant toddler capacity conversation. So to Carol's point, everyone's looking at what's going to happen next and how do we continue to sustain these programs. We were fortunate at the state level in the last budget that through the support of Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Husted and the Ohio General Assembly that we were able to put out $15 million in infant toddler infrastructure grants, which were specific to existing programs to open new classrooms. And that's going to hopefully equate to about 2,000 new openings for our infants and toddlers across the state. That's a huge win, step in the right direction. We know that we have that funding in the next year as well, which means that opportunity will come out again in late summer, early fall likely. But I want to jump back to a conversation that Eric started around the pandemic. And, you know, for all the things the pandemic brought to us, I think the one piece that I am hopeful about or I'm grateful for is the fact that it did bring childcare to the forefront, not only as a workforce support, but also as a community need. And it brings us together in the standpoint of it's not just a childcare issue for those working parents and those childcare providers, but people are recognizing it at the business side of things and the community side of things. And just to add to that, we talked about what we see childcare as at the beginning. I've had the opportunity to go around the state, and Central Ohio is not special in this case. I know that's hard to believe because Central Ohio is special, but the one thing that was really consistent is that everyone recognized the need for quality childcare and the investment. And they recognized that sometimes the only people these parents know are their childcare provider. In a world that everything is so virtual, the only other adults they may be interacting with outside of their employment are their childcare provider. So they are everything to these families. And I think recognizing that and recognizing that this isn't just government or working families, but it's community and it's really a much bigger issue that we have to solve together is a positive as we move forward. The last thing I'll say, and I think this statistic is really important for us to think through. We had a lot of people raise hands when they said, do you have kids in childcare? And in 2022, right, this is old data, $10 of every hour a parent worked if they had 2 kids in childcare for the average cost of a childcare provider would go to supporting that. So $10 goes to paying childcare before you talk about transportation or rent or any other expenses. That means We know that went up in 23 and of course in 24, but our working families have tough decisions as well. So I think putting all of that together and kind of where do we see going next, certainly investments are necessary, but just wanted to call out some of those critical data points as well.
Speaking about investments, what are some of the investments that employers can make to ensure that their families are being taken care of and help kind of facilitate childcare for their employees?
I'm going to speak for CODA, but also I think in general, this is somebody who's taking advantage of it right now. We have the tax incentive, the FSA for childcare. And so it's a way for, childcare is not cheap, right? And I think about this a lot because it is my everyday now. My son's name is Paul. Paul just started childcare last week, and he did get sick last week too because he was sharing that chewing toy with somebody else. It was really important to me that I was at a facility that I trusted and that it felt safe and it felt peaceful for me when I dropped him off. And that also came at a price tag, but I also am thinking, okay, what can I do with my employer? And so having that FSA was really important for me because every little bit helps. And I think about it as somebody who can afford it, but it's hard. Right? I think about the people who can't afford it. I think about my grandmother she was a single mom of 5 children, and her village took care. We talk about those non-paid ones, right? The grandmother down the street or the neighbor. And I think about that a lot as, when it's time for a child to, or maybe they don't have the option of no longer having the neighbor down the street, how do they afford that? And so employers have to play a big part of that. We were just talking, Carol and I, we're right next to, Kitty Academy's right next to CODA, and I'm like, let's talk about getting something done there for us. And that starts not just at childcare, but also at making sure that the working parent has the opportunity to be with their child. So one last thing I'll say is that CODA just passed a new paid family leave policy where it's 12 weeks fully paid during your maternity leave. Non-birthing parent gets 6 weeks, and they can use that as they want. And that is so important. That's the beginning part of the journey. I'm my child's childcare first, right? So what employers can do is give your employee the opportunity to be with their child first, and then figure out what's next, who's going to take care of my child. So I think it starts at that point too.
I think, Aslyn, you're right there. We're talking about access and affordability, and I think from the employer-sponsored side of it, and I see a lot of my peers and providers here in this space. And I believe that most people would welcome employer-sponsored programs, and what that could look like for folks may include, just discount programs to where, if you are an employee at PNC and you use these providers, a partnership has been formed where 20 or 25% of your tuition is covered or split between both the provider and PNC. When it comes to affordability, providers do not want to raise tuition on families. We want to make that process as seamless as possible and really be a part of the family partnership to help care be affordable for folks. Even our childcare staff and educators that are coming to work every day and bringing their children, when we look at the opportunity that we had to raise wages in our schools, what that did for some folks is that made them ineligible for publicly funded childcare. So now as their employer and potentially someone that has been with us for an extended period of time, what we were almost obligated to do was to continue care for their child, but for free. And so at some particular point, when you look at what additional investments could be, in a world where you're hopeful, is it a thought that if I have a staff member, an educator that's working every day with children, that there's some subsidy or some split that we could do so that those employees that come to work with kids each and every day don't carry that burden of childcare themselves, or that the providers are not forced to absorb that cost alone. And so I think that there's some thoughts really around affordability that we can really extend some of the conversations around so that we come up with a solution that works for everyone.
Just to add to that point, certainly that's been a topic of conversation with the governor and lieutenant governor, and certainly they've came out and said in many forums that they are supportive of trying to increase eligibility for our low-income working families. But in addition to that, there's another opportunity that we're trying to work through, and it's a public-private partnership in this space. And we really want to use some federal grant dollars to partner with local entities to bring together businesses and childcare providers to find new ways to partner. So that could look at like a variety of different circumstances, anything from maybe a wage supplement to a reduction or maybe priority on that wait list. And the goal is that we can bring together these childcare providers and businesses and not have them have to front the full cost of that investment in that first year, and allow them to see how it works, allow them to see that their employees, they have an easier time recruiting or retaining staff, that they could take advantage of the federal tax credit and then continue that investment to maintain the relationship. And we know sometimes it's really hard to get those relationships started, so we're hoping with some additional state and federal dollars that we can take some of that risk out and learn a lot of lessons on how we could help partner in this space as well. So that's an opportunity that's out for Franklin County right now. We're hopeful that we'll get a lot of partners, and anyone listening certainly will want to get your contact information and be in touch on that, but a lot of good opportunity to learn and grow in that space as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
Something that I know a lot of folks talk about is the cost of college, and there's resources for that. There's loans for college, loans for daycare. Sounds kind of like an abstract thought, but I know I was in San Francisco. A month of daycare costs almost as much as a quarter of college. Is this something that we should explore, or does this speak to just a larger problem?
I definitely think that it speaks to the larger problem, and would hate to see families incur additional debt to provide high quality care for their children. I think the more pressing conversation really lends itself to what Kara is speaking of in terms of private public partnerships to help make care more affordable, even suggestions of, I think there's a model out there with regards to New Mexico where they've made it a part of their state constitution. And federal poverty level for publicly funded childcare has been extended to 400% of federal poverty level. And there are some permanent dollars that are available for care and early education, and I think it's looking to that. But in no way would I remotely ask a family to incur or take on debt for childcare as well. I think that things are the investments for preschool for students in Ohio has changed a bit, and so now we have a lot of programming for your 3, 4, and 5-year-olds that are just outside of kindergarten, but I really think the opportunity is with our infant and toddlers as well. The cost of infant care is extremely high, and I say that as a provider, but that is what's required to provide high-quality care as well. Our center in Reynoldsburg received one of the infant toddler infrastructure grants with the state, which is also our oldest academy. But what that has been, and we received that notification just at the end of January, but we've already been able to reach 6 new families, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's huge in that space. And so we've already been able to reach 6 new families that have enrolled and started or will soon start here in the next week. And so we want to make sure that we're able to increase access for families and make sure that that's available as families, as women look to return to work, after they've had an extended maternity leave, and possibly even a paid maternity leave or an unpaid maternity leave. But we want to make sure that care is affordable for them, and so we're able to provide those opportunities.
Jump in. I do want to let folks know that we will be taking questions from the audience. So if you want to make your way back to that CMC sign there, when they wrap up here, we'll go to audience questions.
Heartily agree, Carol, and congratulate, celebrate what you've been doing in terms of the infant toddler space. You know, the answer to the problems in this report isn't how do we get more money out of families by taxing their future income. That's really what a loan is. It's borrowing from your future income. No, the answer to this problem is how do we as a community, as a state, as a country, come together and figure out the challenge of child care financing. It's probably going to be mixed. And I'm not giving up hope. This is my 25th year in what I would call an advocacy role. And we got close. Last summer, the summer of 2022, we got within 2 votes of universal child care, no more than 7% of a family's income for everybody in this country. 2 votes. One of those votes, by the way, will be here tomorrow at CMC. And so it is possible. And there are other things that give me hope, too. You know, this is a bipartisan issue. It may not always feel like it, right? We tend to put uniforms on and go to corners, but it has overwhelming support from business folks, support from liberal do-gooders, and that gives me hope that we can find common ground. You know, our governor saw a priority in not only child care, but all issues related to children, and made it a key thing that he created a whole new department just focused on children. Kara gets to wake up and go to bed every night thinking about what to do to improve conditions for children. That's huge. And I'm also buoyed by the idea that there is innovation in this space. There's new and different things being tried. Last week, I was talking to a public-private partnership in Iowa, where you would never expect it from this relatively rural area, the things they were thinking about doing in line with things that have come up in our community as well. There's innovation around how to get new services out. There's innovation how to meld the challenge of childcare as a work support and the critical role of childcare and early learning in promoting children to be school ready. You know, we haven't even talked about that. We need to do a whole forum on closing the school readiness gap. So I'm hopeful. I'm not disappointed, but I will say the answer is not taxing families more by having them take out loans on their future income.
And I would say that parents are doing that already. They're putting it on their credit card because they want their child to have the best care that they can think they can afford, and they're willing to do that already. So you don't need them to go to a bank. They're already doing that, and then they're getting their and then paying that off becomes something that has already put them in debt, right? Because as somebody who just put their child in childcare, I wanted my child to go to the best location that I could afford, and I put myself at the top of it because that felt right. And also because I had a friend who was going there and she vouched for her child feeling loved and cared, right? So you go with your own eyes to this location and that location, and then you talk to people to say, like, is your child well cared for? And then you start to do the numbers. You're like, oh, all right, we'll make it work, right? How many families are making it work? And how many families are making it work because they're choosing to put that on a credit card and they're not going to the bank getting the loan, but it's there, right? And so I'm with you at the universal childcare. I'm with you with classroom readiness, right? So that's the other thing I think about is I was a kindergarten teacher in the Bronx. I did Teach for America, and I had children who came into my classroom who couldn't even identify their name at that point, right? And it was my job to catch them up. And so I think about that as well is, you know, these childcare centers are getting our children ready for kindergarten, and then education is their career, right? Like I think about Paul going to kindergarten, and oh, by the way, I'm already thinking about that. What school is he going to go to? Should I do private? Should I go public? I'm a product of a public school education, and I feel great about that. But these are the things that you think about, and I'm not unique in that. And whatever my paycheck says doesn't make me unique in that. Every parent's thinking about that, you know?
The last thing I would add on this question is to maybe not talk about it as loans. In the executive budget, obviously the state does a budget every 2 years. We did one last year. We did propose in the executive budget a scholarship idea. So it's not the same as an entitlement program, but it still supports for those families as they climb in income. Unfortunately, it didn't get passed in the last budget, but certainly we're going to continue to have those conversations and figure out what the right path forward is. But I think the great thing is there's not one solution. It's going to take many of these solutions to try to make a dent in the issues that we're seeing. But as we all come together, I think the creativity is the part that we find hope in, because we're seeing our communities rally. We're seeing new people in this space having conversations about childcare to solution, and that's a big deal.
If you want to ask your question.
I'm Mantra Moody. I'm from CMC, so I'm curating questions online. So if anyone has any questions in the room, you can come line up behind me. All right. So my first question online is about law of supply and demand. So free market capitalism is supposed to be good for meeting big demand with big supply. But with childcare, that doesn't seem to be happening, at least not in the U.S. Why is it? And what do you think is broken?
Well, I'm the wannabe economist, so I'll take a swing at that. Well, that is the crux of why, when Secretary Yellen, Secretary of Treasury Yellen says that childcare is a fundamentally broken market, that's exactly what she's talking about. It does not work for families, it does not work for employers, it does not work for childcare providers in the main. And the reason it doesn't work is in a normal market, if you have scarcity, you raise prices, you produce more, and you have these responses you can take that are driven by what's happening between demand and supply. In our market, it doesn't work that way. Right now, providers are squeezed. They don't want to raise tuition, but they've got to be able to have staff. And you raise tuition, and the private paying parents, remember, that's where the bulk of the revenue is. Fewer of them can afford it. So that is not a solution. Part of the reason it's not a solution also is we're not making widgets or burgers or you pick your other good and service. We're talking about the development of human life. If you want to be crass about it, we're talking about the building of an American worker, the creation of a student. And that is not something to be taken lightly. You know, we've had this labor challenge locally. I mean, everybody's having trouble finding good staff and keeping them. If you go to a coffee shop, it means you got to wait a little longer, right? If you go to a restaurant, it means you got to wait a little longer for your meal. It might mean the meal's not as good because they've got somebody, subbing. But in childcare, you can't make a child wait. You can't extend the line. Children are one when they're one. Families don't have children for 1 year alone. They have children over a span of years. And we have to be able to answer the needs of those children, those families, every day. And so relying on market forces to solve for this is a problem because it is very taxing, very time-consuming, it's very labor-intensive, and we are not creating consumable goods that you can, tinker with the quality of.
Hi, Chris Westman, Nationwide Children's. It's been a fascinating conversation about the financing of childcare, and I really appreciate all of your comments. I just want to come back to the other piece of your report that talked about staff well-being, and I wondered if we could just not miss an opportunity to have your thoughts and ideas about what our challenges are and what employers and the community can do about tackling the well-being as well.
As a provider here in Central Ohio, we really are focused on well-being, so I really appreciate your question. Each and every day, we have educators and staff that I know walk in the door, and they want to do a phenomenal job for kids. But sometimes the barriers that they're either experiencing either within the academy in taking care of possibly challenging behaviors, or even if it's challenges at home that they're experiencing, the mental health of our team is extremely important, and so we make sure that we build those resources there. Would love to see more support and more dollars for educators and our team and staff as well. And I think that, to lean on our team, to ask them, how they're feeling, what their needs are, so that we can innovate and create wellness programs that really support our team where they are. I think the other piece around mental health is the idea that our workforce, typically challenged by income and wage, the wage structure that is currently in place, really struggles just meeting day-to-day needs. And so it's difficult to walk in the door and feel like you can leave all of that behind. And so you have some of the best caregivers in the world, some of the best educators providing care to kids, but in the back of their mind throughout the day is they're wondering, is my car still going to be on the lot, or is somebody coming to repossess it while I'm here because they're having a difficult time making that payment? Am I going to go home to my belongings outside of my apartment? But yet and still, they're there every day making sure that they're providing high quality care and getting kids ready for kindergarten and making sure that all of their needs are met. And so we have a responsibility to the teams that are in our schools to make sure that we're providing them the resources that they need. And I don't want to say survive, but to thrive. And so my question, and my question for even all of my peers and providers is, what does that look like? What can we do to further support the teams that are doing a dynamic job for us each and every day, and making that solution sustainable, and something that staff can access fairly easily, and to remove the stigma if someone walks in and just says, I'm not here today, I'm struggling with X, and we need to figure out how we help them meet those needs right there really on the spot.
Carol, can I add to that? I was thinking about, it's not lost on me that I was coming here today, and today's Valentine's Day, and I was thinking about what gift to get the ladies who've been with Paul, right? And I genuinely thought about giving cash. I went, I got my, obligatory sweet thing for them, and I got them a gift card, but I thought about giving cash. Right? Because I know this. I know that their hourly wage, I know this before I had a child because I was an educator, right? And so I also think, I know it is the responsibility of the employer, but as the parent who's dropping my child off to them, I think about, I hope you're having a good day today. To the adult in the room, I hope that everything's okay, because I know if everything's okay with you, everything's going to be okay in this classroom too, right? And so I do think about that as the parent walking in. How can I show gratitude to the caregiver and the appreciation, because it matters too, the parent who shows up. We might have a concern, but we also have gratitude toward them. So I thought about that today as I was going in and thinking, okay, is this acceptable? Is it taboo? I don't want to insult them, but also I have an obligation to show these folks who are taking care of my child that I appreciate the work they're doing.
And I believe that would be appreciated. Obviously, check with the policy of your provider and all of those things like that, but I know that the staff would appreciate that. I also know that as providers, home care providers, even the unlicensed childcare providers, that the leader in those programs typically operates as the employer assistance program. And so we have to be careful, I think, too, not monitoring our leaders, because it's kind of like, I'm from healthcare, and we always used to kind of say, who cares for the caregiver? And even here in this space, who cares for the caregiver as we're considering mental health issues and potential solutions, and how we can be creative, and what resources and dollars can be available, so that even our leaders that are in each of our programs aren't necessarily carrying home the bag of rocks each and every day, that they too have a resource and an outlet and someone to talk to and someone to kind of bounce ideas off of in terms of what is the solution, how can we make it better. And so I really appreciate your question regarding the well-being of our staff. It is something that I do take home each and every day and try to prioritize in terms of just how can we make it better for our teams and our caregivers as they're providing care to our children.
And then I think we have that final question.
Yes. So I will end this with this question. If each of you could wave a magic childcare wand, what would you fix about childcare in America right now? And we have about 3 minutes left. Just so you know.
I'm glad she said it, not me.
No.
I'll go first. As I'm glad to go first this time, so I can take the good answer. I think a money tree would be great. Obviously, you hear us talking a lot about resources, but it's not just wage. It's actually all the ancillary resources that these families and providers need access to as well. So I'm going to wrap in my answer to the last question with this one is making sure that they have the resources and supports when they recognize a kid or a family needs help, that we have the prevention programs, the intervention programs, and the financial services to actually offer and have them available. So that would be my magic wand. I would make all of that happen with one fell swoop so that when we have early identification, we can actually make the difference in that child's life immediately rather than putting them on a wait list or having to route them to multiple resources to find what they need.
Universal childcare.
I can't be so succinct, but I agree. No, one thing I would say is Kara, you were right that in the pandemic, childcare got lifted up differently, and the fact that it is a work support wasn't seen quite so like a bad thing. So there's greater appreciation. But what I don't think we've really done yet is made sure that growing awareness has turned into action. That people see themselves as, yes, an advocate for childcare, that the business owner, and we've all got this issue, right? That the business owner is thinking about what can I do to make it possible to offer a greater benefit. There is a federal tax credit that's lovely. It only goes up to a certain point, but you have to add your voice. You have to. The wand that comes behind those resources that Kara mentioned in her wand is having a room full of folks who are new to the issue, who are galvanized by it, having a city full of people who are willing to take action, to step up, stand up, and do something about this so those resources can materialize. It's not impossible. 2 votes away from it in 2022.
I would, if I had a magic wand, I think the thing that I would change is that everyone would keep the little people, the children at the center of every decision, and that we move forward with hope. And so I think that recognizing that everybody can do something for kids and can show that we're choosing children and families with every decision that we make in the early learning environment would be what I would do if I could shake a wand at it.
All amazing answers. Just want to thank you for even just facilitating this conversation. I think we had a great discussion. Handing it over now to Commissioner Crawley.
Thank you so much, Sierra, and thank you to our panel. Thank you for your commitment to children and families. As you heard, providing children with high-quality early learning opportunities is crucial for their success in school and beyond. It's important to give them a solid foundation and prepare them for the challenges that they will face in the future. Children who miss out on these opportunities may struggle to catch up with their peers, which is why it's so important to invest in early childcare and education. The landscape of childcare has changed significantly, and it has become increasingly difficult for families to find high-quality, affordable childcare. With the population set to grow here in Central Ohio in the coming decades, it's important to act now to ensure that families have access to resources that they need. If we don't act, low and moderate income families will continue to be pushed out of childcare opportunities, and the cycle will repeat itself. It's important to prioritize early childhood education and invest in programs that provide families with the support that they need to give their children the best start in life so they can thrive and not just survive. I say that all the time, Carolyn. I love it. My colleagues and I are proud to have created the Franklin County Rise Child Care Initiative, which started out as a $24 million historic investment and will be $42 million over a total of 4 years. That child care initiative provides scholarship for families who are on the benefits cliff. And crucially, it helps teachers with emergency rental and utility assistance and provides financial incentives to child care centers to expand capacity and serve more families, improve the quality of their services, and to offer non-traditional hours. Thank you to our partners, Action for Children and Future Ready 5, for partnering with the county to serve our families. This sort of program is a good start, but it can't possibly solve all the child care crisis that we face on its own. That's why the Board of Commissioners are currently in the process of tearing down our downtown jail and building a child care center that will be state-of-the-art for county and city employees as well as the community. We are also working on an expanded learning strategy to support all children in Franklin County prenatal to 8. So you can see that at the board we are doing our part, but there is so much more to do. Ohio ranks among the bottom 5 states in the nation when it comes to access to child care subsidies and supports for working families. So we need action at the State House to address that. And we need our state leadership to help us innovate new solutions for our working families all over Ohio. And the federal government doesn't get off easy. We need advocacy and support at the federal level. Thank you today to our sponsors, PNC Bank, the Franklin County Board of Commissioners, and Columbus State Community College. Thank you also to the Ellis for hosting us today, and to the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and the Columbus Dispatch for supporting today's live stream. And a very special appreciation to today's speakers, Carol, Eric, Asleen, Kara, and our host, Sierra. Please make plans now to attend next week's CMC Forum, High Stakes, How Legal Weed Will Reshape Ohio. Yes, high stakes, How Legal Weed Will Reshape Ohio. Thank you again, everyone. We could not do this without you all. Have a great afternoon.